Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another session of Voices of Healthcare Cloud. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We're so glad you joined us today. We have some exciting content and exciting presenters who are going to be sharing with all of us. But for a little bit of housekeeping, we want to make sure everyone knows how to engage with the technology and in the live event. So we want to make sure you know you are encouraged to ask questions and participate. You'll see we have already published in our live Q&A right now some announcements and questions. If you don't mind, let us know where you're joining us from so we can engage with you. Also, our presenters are ready to answer any live questions. So if you want your question answered, please sure to post early and often. This will also be recorded. And so we have the Microsoft Health and Life Sciences blog where all of our content is stored, and we encourage you to go there often and check in for great content. Now, how to engage in that Q&A panel. You will see in the top right-hand corner a little bubble that looks like a question mark or looks like a chat button. Click on that and you'll have a new panel that flies out to the side. And when you see that panel, go ahead and type in your question. You can choose to include your name or be anonymous. And so we will moderate all of those questions. If it's a personal question, we can answer that to you directly, but most often these questions are really great and everyone can benefit from them. So we will post them live for everyone to see. So go ahead and go in there and let us know where you're joining from. We're so excited that some of you are already engaging. So on to the presentation. We are so excited to have a handful of presenters today. We are joined by one of the gold member Microsoft partners, Avanade. We are excited that they are here to talk to us about hyperautomation beyond RPA. And so with that, I'd love to pass it over to the team to introduce themselves. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Shelley. I'll ask Jeff and Christiana to introduce themselves. Just want to say hi, team from the Microsoft side. Jake Thompson, I'm on our Global Black Belt team. Interesting title. Doesn't mean I have any kind of special, technical kung fu to throw at the conversation today. Just the team that focuses on digital transformation with our global healthcare customers. Jeff, do you want to say hi to the team?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Jake. Thank you for having me. Jeff Hodgson, I lead Avanade's intelligent automation capability here in North America. Hyperautomation is one of those things that's been coming and growing in popularity for the last few years. And I'm super excited to start hearing Microsoft pushing heavily into this space. And it's exciting to have now a sort of hyperautomation platform within the Microsoft environment that we can take out to clients. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Hi everyone, I'm Christiana Volker. I'm the Health and Life Science Business Applications Lead at Avanade, and I've been in healthcare technology for about 15 years. And hyperautomation is a little bit new to me, but I've been learning a lot, syncing up with Jeff and Jake. So hopefully you all can learn a lot from this presentation like I did.
Thanks, Christiana. Thanks, Jeff. So team, just a little bit about where we're going for the next 30 minutes or so. Some of us might have some snacks or some coffee, or maybe actually getting some lunch at this point. We're just going to start with, what's the state of automation in healthcare? What is, Jeff talked about hyperautomation, intelligent automation. What is this buzzword? What is Avanade and Microsoft's point of view when it comes to hyperautomation? And, how does Microsoft empower our customers, our end users around automation mixology? Truly one of my favorite terms as we've been researching automation. So we'll talk a bit about automation mixology and the tools that come in the toolbox. But then probably our most important part of the agenda is how do we scale this? How do we do this enterprise wide? So like the rest of the team, I'm probably going to turn off my camera here, just give you all a little bit of real estate back. And save some bandwidth on my side. But like Shelley mentioned, please ask questions, post stuff in the IM window. We are monitoring that. We do want to make sure that this is valuable for all of those that have attended today. So state of automation in healthcare, I'm actually going to ask Christiana to share some of what she's been finding and learning as far as where we're at within the healthcare industry and where automation may apply.
Thank you, Jake. So we've been seeing a lot of challenges, before COVID even happened, but certainly since COVID, we've had a lot of stresses on the healthcare industry, both payers and providers. And the three main challenges that we are continually hearing from our customers are, first off, clinician workforce, just pressures and burnout, really. So, there's certainly a lot of turnover. There's a lot of increase in costs to retain and recruit clinical staff and other staff as well. So anywhere where we can not necessarily replace people, but make people's jobs easier and have them focus more on patients and more important parts of their job than filling out paperwork and doing administrative tasks. That's really the key and the goal. And then patient member experience. Certainly there's been the consumerization of healthcare that's been happening over the last several years, and every other industry is sort of leaps and bounds ahead of healthcare. We can make a reservation for dinner through our phone. I can order a birthday gift and have it delivered tomorrow. But when I go to make an appointment with my provider, or I go to figure out something with my payer, I have to call, and it takes a long time, and it might require a couple different follow-ups, and it's just often a painful process. So how can we use some pieces of automation to make the experience better and streamline processes? And then lastly, health data interoperability. This is really a huge pain point. There's a whole wide variety of different solutions that every customer has, and often the data is siloed between all of those, and it's nearly impossible to unlock insights from that data. But how can we sort of connect those different systems and use common platforms and common dataverse and then unlock insights using AI and machine learning? So that's another big key area where we're seeing focus. If we move on to the next slide, we can talk about where automation particularly plays for payers and providers. So this slide shows kind of three areas where we can focus: front office, clinical, and back office, and then it's divided by the payer and provider. And then the numbers around each box is the distribution of the addressable market. So really we could make 30% improvement when we can engage members and patients in better ways and improve their experience and have them continually coming back rather than looking for other providers, because we know that they really want personalized interactions. Same for the payer side. Members really want smart, intelligent customer interactions. We don't want to have to call 7 times about the same claim issue, things like that. And then on the clinical side, certainly you can leverage automation and AI and hyperautomation to help with clinical pieces and really improve outcomes and the health of patients, which is really the key to the healthcare business, right? So how can we identify patients that might be at risk for a disease or some sort of event? Maybe it's a cardiac event or something happening down the line, and how could we avoid that? And then on the back office side, certainly managing supply chain and revenue cycle. So making sure that we're capturing all of the billing and making sure that all of the revenue is collected for the services that have been provided. Otherwise, it's not financially sustainable. And certainly managing supply chain for all the different materials and things that are needed to deliver high quality services. And on the payer side, certainly also managing billing for members and things like that, and then reimbursement for the provider side, making sure that providers are paid, and then also can help with things like quality and compliance, and also certainly the network of providers and managing those relationships and referrals and things like that.
Yeah, I think what gets me most excited about what we see on this slide and what we're looking at in healthcare as it relates to automation is, the front office and the back office, it's kind of a given. There's tremendous value to be had there. And, it's the same across every industry. But where it's kind of unique with healthcare is the enormous burden that's put on the really critical resources in the operation of especially a provider in a hospital, right? People who are overburdened with administrative tasks, despite the fact that their role and their skill set and their certification and their licenses here is about a very specific sort of medical important, skill. So we've got folks wasting, a lot of valuable time and a lot of valuable resources doing things that is not significantly value add. And not only is that wasteful for the industry, it's wasteful from multiple perspectives. And what I'd like to drive towards is a situation where we're removing that burden not only to generate value for the business, but also to start avoiding things like nurse burnout and doctor burnout, clinician burnout, right? And start to drive away from the situation where I feel like we're in, where people are sort of leaving the industry because they are overburdened with tasks that are menial and not adding value, the sort of value that they wanted to add when they got into the industry, right? So I'm super excited about that clinical pillar of work for automation.
I
Great.
absolutely agree.
Great insight, Jeff and Christiana. I think there's tremendous opportunity here, and I'd love to get y'all's take on this. And I think this is why we labeled today's talk Beyond RPA. Most of what we're hearing from our customers, joint customers, Microsoft, Avanade, is that folks are entering the automation space for that. We want to decrease costs. We want to reduce those errors or increase efficiency. Like, how do we do faster prior auth? Or perhaps launching a new business or new service, especially around self-service. Or something like you mentioned, how do we boost member or patient or provider satisfaction, engagement, experience? And I think folks are seeing that usually we jump in with like, hey, let's just look at RPA, and we're starting to see limitations that we need to go broader than just RPA. RPA is only getting us so far, and multiple different departments are engaging in automation initiatives, and that's leading to tool and vendor sprawl. A lot of this has been circulated around, hey, this is the ROI that we can drive, but folks are still not seeing that P&L impact. One of my favorite sayings from back when I was a COO was the bottleneck moves. Okay, we automated this process, and we want to make sure we don't just automate a bad process, but we automated this process, but then the bottleneck, the constraint in the system moved upstream or downstream. So we still didn't end up with that ROI. We still didn't end up with that P&L impact. The workforce, they're worried about robots coming to take their jobs. So we're not getting as much more of a cultural aspect, a change management aspect of this. We're not getting as much engagement from the workforce to help with these automation initiatives. One of the phrases I've heard from folks is, we attack those time vampires. We address the burden that was in the business, but then the burden shifted and it ended up in IT. So how do we help folks in IT govern this growing list of automation tools? A lot of automation starts reactive. How do we just fix these gaps? Or like I mentioned earlier, by department. Now folks are looking at this, how do we do it long term? And then missing value and use, and probably value and use should be highlighted a bit differently there. But we started with cost takeout and how can we reduce cost, and a lot of that has to do with hours saved. But just because you saved 3 hours in somebody's day or week doesn't mean that translated to actual value and use. That person still very much employed. They did something else with their time. What did they do with that time that led to value? Is this kind of the same stuff that you're seeing, Jeff?
100%, and I think we'll get into some details around where, when we talk to clients about hyperautomation, the one thing that I try to help them focus on the most is understand the value case, right? What is the outcome we're trying to achieve with technologies, and how are we going to measure that? How are we going to monitor it? and you know, lacking that clear vision and that clear definition of how we're measuring and monitoring value is one of the things that really is a roadblock between starting with sort of tactical implementations of RPA and moving towards a scaled hyperautomation capability.
Love it. Well, let's start unpacking some of that, because we want to avoid this. This is what analysts, including Gartner, are projecting for a lot of our customers, is that if we don't get this under control, we're headed towards a 40x, 40-fold TCO of what it should be. So there's incredible impetus to get automation, hyperautomation, intelligent automation, all of this under control. But let's define that. Jeff, I think you all have a great kind of wheel of goodness slide here to help our audience understand what we mean when we say hyperautomation.
Yeah, the wheel of goodness. No, I mean, it's when you look at the vendor landscape that's sort of exploded since 2015, 2016 around automation, people kept on finding missing elements of the automation tech stack and filling them with individual point solutions. And now the situation we're in moving through 2021 and 2022 is, a bunch of larger vendors who are coalescing around a common set of capabilities that are sort of commonly identified as those core elements of a hyperautomation platform. And Microsoft is really starting to lead the pack in terms of that capability. And what we mean in terms of a hyperautomation platform is one that can not just provide that RPA execution piece, but actually go full end-to-end in terms of what it takes to understand a process, read data, make decisions, execute, and orchestrate between humans and automation. So, if we were to unpack this a little bit, right, our process intelligence wedge on the left-hand side, this is the set of technologies around process mining and task mining that allows us to really decompose a process and understand it in a data-driven fashion, identify those opportunities for optimization and improvement, and then accelerate the delivery of that actual optimization as well via things like task mining, etc. Right? So, Jake, you were talking a little bit about how do we know we're not just sort of squeezing the bubble of effort further down the road, right? How do we know that we're actually increasing throughput or increasing efficiency by removing effort in point X? Well, this process intelligence segment is how we can look at an end-to-end process driven by the data out of ERPs or whatever system it is we're looking at, and understand and in fact simulate, if we were to remove a piece of effort, would that in fact increase our throughput, or would that simply move the bottleneck to another station down the line? So this is a hugely important and relatively new segment to the hyperautomation wheel of technologies, but it's certainly one that I'm incredibly excited about. And obviously with the Microsoft acquisition of Mineit, and that being integrated into the Power Platform as a whole, that's a huge area of growth. The content intelligence piece, this is where we're looking to ingest and understand data that isn't structured. So this is letters and emails and faxes, this is images, this is voice recordings or phone calls, whatever it may be, right? This is data that is not in a nice tabular Excel format or whatever it may be, right? That we can't easily understand and interact with as a robot. And this is things like OCR, natural language processing, machine learning, etc. So the idea here is for us to take that data and turn it into a format that we can then use for analytics and for execution. And so that decision intelligence piece in the middle, this is where we are using those sort of advanced technologies, but also, the core analytics technologies to support decisions, to augment decisions, and to automate decisions. And the way that I've come to differentiate those three, and I'm not going to say that I penned this definition, but it is a very good one, is to support a decision. If you wanted to get, for example, from your house to the nearest Piggly Wiggly or whatever, Costco or wherever you're trying to go, supporting a decision on how you get there, right, would be giving you a roadmap and letting you decide the best route to get there. If you wanted to augment that decision, it would be giving you a GPS, which has the roadmap within it, but then also gives you suggestions on the next best action to take, right? Turn right in 100 meters or take this route, it'll cut out 3 minutes from your journey, whatever it may be. But automating that decision not only gives you that augmented information, but then selects what would be the right thing to do, and builds a self-driving capability around that, and actually takes you to your Costco to buy your rotisserie chicken or whatever it is you're getting. So, you know, it's exciting that the technology is now getting to the point where we can really start to dive deep into that sort of decision intelligence, and not just taking data and processing it into databases, but in fact making decisions on that data and executing on increasingly more subjective business processes. The execution segment, this is where we commonly get pigeonholed into as an automation capability. I must say this is where sort of RPA sits, right? This is taking that data and doing those swivel chair activities to move it from system A to system B. But it's not just RPA, right? Power Apps can easily fulfill this capability, right? RPA is a very UI focused technology. More and more people want to focus on API connectors and doing direct connections into systems. Ultimately, RPA is one of the technologies we can use to do this execution phase, but really we're just looking at how do we get information from our content and from our decision that's been made into whatever action needs to be taken. And then of course, human and bot orchestration. We need, you know, in the future of how business processes are going to look, likely what we're going to have is a situation where the technology is going to be the quarterback of the business process, but it still needs to interface with the human operators in the background. And so that's where we bring in things like Power Apps and Power Pages or Teams, so that we can ping exceptions to human operators or high value cases or whatever it may be, right? We need to have some way of interfacing between the automated process and the human-led process, and that's where that piece comes in. And of course, you know, this wheel could be expanded well beyond this, right? I haven't mentioned anywhere in here, for example, the concept of virtual agents or chatbots or anything like that, right? But in terms of a core set of technologies and capabilities, this is really what we at Avanade at least think about in terms of hyperautomation and how it relates to the Microsoft ecosystem.
It's a great overview, Jeff. And I think, you know, what you just finished on the Microsoft ecosystem, one of the questions that we immediately get is, there really a Microsoft ecosystem around automation? So while I'm not, you know, a huge proponent of, you know, you know, everybody's got these analyst reports and stuff, I like this visual because it shows that we have been making incredible engineering strides and also acquisitions in these core areas around hyperautomation. So there's now a whole suite of automation tools that Microsoft brings to bear, and something that we've done is not just build these tools as their own kind of, you know, best of breed tool, but built them into the rest of the Microsoft stack. We often say better together, but in this scenario, we've built automation into Office 365. We've built automation tooling into Teams. You can launch a Power Automate flow right from Excel within Windows 11, and I'll talk about that in a second. You know, everybody that has Windows 10, Windows 11 can leverage Power Automate Desktop right now. Obviously with Power Platform, but Power BI, Azure, Dynamics, we've woven that into our complete tool set. We've made this interoperable with the 800 plus different third-party connectors. You can extend that to custom and on-prem, but that whole ecosystem, not just from a low-code perspective, but all of the Azure services, all the underlying PaaS and IaaS stack brought together to deliver on our customers' automation needs, and it's taken off. We obviously, this is a conversation, a discussion today focused on healthcare, but it's not just healthcare, it's multiple industries. In fact, I think it's well, we'll see what this slide says, 400,000 plus organizations now using Microsoft automation tools, and we've engaged Forrester to start tracking the business value that's been created working with Microsoft and partners like Avanade to deliver on these automation needs. Jeff, I want to come back to our affectionate wheel of goodness around hyperautomation, but that top layer that you described was really the tools. And I want to, for our audience, just share, you know, what is in that toolbox that Microsoft provides for our customers, and you know, our approach for those tools is democratize. It's in our mission statement to empower every person, organization on the planet to achieve more. So we've built these automation tools for business developers, for pro developers, and for IT, all within the same tooling. And I mentioned this earlier around we provide these tools within the rest of the Microsoft stack. So 1 billion plus users that already are on Windows have access to our excuse me, Power Automate desktop RPA tool right now. This lights up a host of use cases, whether it's in the call center and we're doing document automation. This one, and we have a document automation starter kit. This one just keeps coming up over and over again. How do we do document automation? Approvals. I'm just going to pick and choose some from this menu here. Approvals. So many of our approval processes broke when we went to hybrid work. You know, the speaker traffic couldn't go from cubicle to cubicle. How do we handle these approval processes? You know, in HR, the W-9 verifications, the amount of time that HR departments spend on those W-9 verifications, can we just take those off? Can we eliminate or hide those in the processes? Fax-based, it's healthcare. Fax-based. I was just talking with a customer who said over 80% of their prior auth are still coming in fax-based. Can we automate that? Can we almost reimagine the process? Supply chain, lots of use cases within supply chain, within sales and marketing, outbound outreach. Jeff, you mentioned chatbots, virtual agents. So many of our conversations in healthcare now are almost an IVR bot reaching out not just to a member or a patient, but reaching out to other bots. You know, a payer bot, a payer IVR bot, reaching out to talk to a provider IVR bot that's doing inbound. So now we've kind of gotten into this world of bots talking to bots via the phone, and then a list of other payer provider use cases. But let me pause and see if Jeff or Christiana, you'd like to share any thoughts on this menu of potential use cases.
I think to your point, just the fact that there's so many paper forms and faxes and all of that, we've helped a number of customers use things like OCR to read those forms because maybe they can't replace the paper forms yet, and just be able to extract the pertinent data and then put that in, you know, a Power App or something to then take action on. That's been a really key use case. And then even going beyond that and trying to automate some of those processes so we're not even using paper and faxes. And then to Jeff's point earlier about, you know, just the clinical part, so many clinicians want to be used at the top of their license, and that's, you know, how they justify their high salaries and things like that. So just being able to automate and facilitate different procedures or different processes. Like we've helped a number of customers with discharge planning. Like, you know, discharging a patient from a hospital is it seems to be a really burdensome process of getting multiple different clinicians to sign off on different things and make sure the patient has the right prescriptions and lab reports and orders and different things. And so, you know, just enabling some process automation and things with that to facilitate and enable the clinicians to really focus on the clinical work.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, I think the sky's the limit, right? I mean, customers often come to us asking what are a set of use cases we could apply this technology to, and I kind of turn it around and say, well, where couldn't we apply it? I mean, it's the processes that are everywhere. They've been working the same way for 100 years or more, right? In some cases, what are the chances that it can't be redeemed or fixed in some way with the technology that we now have available to us? Very slim, right? So super excited in this space.
Yeah, Jeff, we get that question a lot, and I agree with you. I like to turn around because it's honestly, it's not Avanade or Microsoft that's going to bring, you know, innovation. We can bring the tools and we can bring the support and best practices, but it's the innovation's locked up within our customers' enterprises. Like I want to hear from those on the front line. I want to hear from those that are doing the work. You know, we talked about employee fears of automation. That's the group that the innovation is going to come from. That's the you know, health force that we want to unlock their potential. And I come back to this concept of automation mixology, but also democratization. We want to put these tools in folks' hands. I mentioned this phrase earlier, automation mixology. just here's a simple use case, and I think why this matters for our audience is if you just take one of those use cases off of that menu that we just discussed. Here's a I won't label it straightforward, but an example use case of managing a member appeal. Well, that's not just back to our title today, RPA. That's not just RPA. RPA is a component, but there's a portal that's part of that automation scenario. There's potentially a chat bot. There's NLP and conversational AI. So when we look at hyperautomation from a Microsoft and Avanade perspective, we want to bring all of the tooling together so this doesn't end up being multiple vendors and multiple costs and multiple governance scenarios. So just a real quick, maybe 3-minute or less overview of the tools that are coming with the Microsoft toolbox here. There's RPA. Yeah, yes, we've labeled this beyond RPA, but RPA is still very important. And our RPA tooling is just drag and drop, putting those variables so that we can either do screen scraping or somebody logs in, the robot logs in as a user and populates data in those UI elements when an API doesn't exist. We do that digital process automation so you can have those cloud-based flows. And as you see on these screens, it's meant to be easy. It's meant to be somebody just putting the next variable on the screen and adding some context to when to trigger off those cloud flows. Also, business process automation. What are the stages and steps, not just required, but also that trigger additional automations, sub-automations at each of those steps so that we have a quality business process flow. There's AI tools built in. So yes, we can use, back to that slide earlier on with the automation ecosystem. Yes, we can leverage Azure and Machine Learning Studio, but we want to make it easy for the folks that are those citizen business developers. Even the pro devs are leveraging these templates for AI tools right out of the gate within the studio. Power Virtual Agents, another quick low-code drag and drop way to build these bots, but something we've recently announced is now you can toggle in the studio between the low-code drag and drop bot designer and the pro-code Azure bot framework. So it's all woven into a single studio. And then Power Pages, the artist formerly known as Power Apps Portals. How do I quickly spin up these external facing customer websites with all of the thematic elements that you would expect? And Jeff, you mentioned this earlier, process mining. I want to see that spaghetti web of the process so I can see where the bottleneck may go. So I'm making sure I'm working on the right task. And when I double click onto that task, I want to see where automation can help. I want to see the ROI projected output, and I want to quickly mitigate that. So with all these toolings, again, we try to make this easy. There's a what tool when kind of, hey, which automation tool should I use to address this part of the task? But let's get back to our main point of today, which is, okay, we have all these tools, we have this menu of use cases. We understand the problems doing this at scale. How do we do this at an enterprise level? So we're back to your wheel here, Jeff. But let's look at that next layer down on how Avanade helps our customers do this.
Yeah, you can tell I've put this slide up twice, which means I'm not super creative in my content. But I actually want to start by going back to you flashed up briefly the sort of analyst report slide of the various different components of this wheel and how Microsoft plays in it. And I think it's very important to point out that Microsoft is a leader in all of these analyst reports, in all of these segments of what makes up hyperautomation, right? And it's unique in that aspect. It's unique in the aspect that we can take just the content intelligence piece and deploy that in isolation and deliver market-leading value to our clients. And I think that is something significant that we shouldn't gloss over. But when we think about how to scale automation, and especially when we start to bring in all these different technologies and talk about hyperautomation, the first thing I think we look to help our customers understand is hyperautomation is less, I think, about necessarily the technology that we use than you might think, right? It's not necessarily a technology game, it's a process game. And by that I mean, you know, if you buy a technology and you go out and try to find a use case to apply that technology against, you're likely to not come up with the right solution for the problems that you're facing. But, you know, at the same time, you also don't want to be buying, you know, 100 different point solutions to solve your problems. So the reason I'm so excited about this Microsoft Hyperautomation suite that we have available to us is that means that we can really take a process led approach to hyperautomation. And what I mean by that is we can look at an end-to-end process and figure out how do we optimize it, how do we improve it, and how do we re-engineer this process to be as efficient as possible, right? To increase throughput as much as possible, leveraging whatever the most appropriate mix of technologies available to us is. And we can do that with the confidence that we will have the technology behind us to back up any statements we make about that technology, right? So it's all about bringing together the end-to-end process and flipping the script from a human-led process with, you know, individual tactical automation assists or technology assists here and there to a completely automated process with a human assist where necessary, right? We're really trying to leverage technology as the quarterback of the process, handing off to human elements where required, or other technologies, or whatever it may be, right? But ultimately, it does have to start with the process. But, you know, at some point you do have to get into the technology and the solution, obviously. And so the second big thing that we have to help our customers with, which is on the next slide, if we could move one ahead, would be how do we right size that solution, right? We could come up with blue sky thinking of what the most incredible solution would look like, but when we're talking about hyperautomation, the temptation is often to go a little bit further than actually makes sense in terms of business value. And this gets right back to what Jake was talking about at the start, is how do we understand what the objectives and the outcomes that we want to achieve are, how do we measure those objectives, and how do we make sure that we combine those objectives with the environment that we find ourselves in, right? What technology do we have available to us? What do the processes look like in terms of health? What do our people and talent strategies look like? How enabled within the cloud or within AI or analytics? How are we, you know, are we just experimenting with automation, or do we already have a scaled approach? Combine the objectives with that environment, and that's what dictates our approach for IA, and that's what dictates our approach for solutioning a hyperautomation solution, right? There's no point building something with all the bells and whistles if your only objective is to save, you know, manual effort. And by applying it against a process, you'll only save an hour a month, right? But at the same time, you need to make sure that you have the scale available to you to actually hit those large solutions when you want to. Jake, before I move on, I don't know if there's any color you want to add to that, or Christiana. If not, happy to jump to the next one.
I think we're good, Jeff. I'll advance the slide here. Perfect.
So how we approach this. Broadly speaking, we take a three-stage approach, right? We start with digitizing processes, and this gets back to the conversation we were having around process mining. How can we get away from subjective stories about what a process really looks like and start to get to a data-driven picture of how our process really runs in practice? How can we map KPIs against the process as it's running? How can we compare that against digital blueprints for industry best practices and visualize that in a way that makes it very easy to move to stage two, which is analyzing that process and understanding and identifying those opportunities for process improvements, right? So again, benchmarking against those industry standards, simulating and providing analytics against what can be done. And that simulation piece, right, is very interesting. This is where we can, you know, literally take a business process and say, you know, if we changed X, Y, and Z, what would the ROI of that be, or would that push the bubble of effort elsewhere? It's a very interesting piece of technology, and then ultimately, you know, understand the process optimization opportunities. Finally, moving into sort of the execution phase, that optimize phase of how do we actually take that strategy we identified from our analysis and put that into action. It's a combination of technology, it's a combination of organizational change management, making sure that, you know, not only are people bought into and adopting the technologies we produce, but also any just fundamental process reengineering tasks or changes to the way that people do the work to create the value that we've identified, and how do we optimize the experience for our clients and for their customers and colleagues. But that optimization piece goes a little bit beyond that as well. You know, the chances are, automation has been around for several years now. The chances of any customer or client or anyone having completely no automation anywhere within their organization is pretty slim. And so we do take that optimization phase one step further. And if you want to jump forward one, Jake, we've actually started to talk to our customers about how do we optimize the value that you get out of existing automations, right? So I think it's fair to say that most organizations will have some form of probably RPA somewhere in the organization, you know, a mix of scale and skill and capability, etc. But one of the conversations we've been having increasingly with clients as Microsoft has continued to build this hyperautomation capability is how can we squeeze the value out of our existing automation stack to the greatest extent possible. And so what we will do with clients is look at their existing stack. We'll understand upfront, for example, how efficiently they built things in terms of code practice, in terms of infrastructure setup, in terms of monitoring and measurement, etc. But ultimately come up with a strategy with our clients as to how we could retire, rebuild, or re-platform their legacy automation suite to make sure that they're getting the most value possible out of their automation, right? To enhance and extend the ROI of that automation. The point being, you know, if you built an RPA while you were, you know, experimenting with technology 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the chances of that continuing to return in the way that you hoped it would 2 or 3 or 4 years ago is probably quite small, right? Things have moved on, the technologies have advanced, your systems and your infrastructure have changed, and so you're probably break fixing a lot. We look at all of those leveraging a technology partner of ours called Blueprint and decide, you know, some things just aren't worth keeping because they're not returning the investment you expected, or, you know, maybe it'd be worth rebuilding that in either a modern technology or something completely different like a Power App or a portal or whatever it is, right? But ultimately, where we land with many of these is that we end up recommending a complete re-platform, right? So lift and shift the remaining automations and move them into the Microsoft suite. And I think we have one more slide on this, Jake, just talking about a case study we ran with Blueprint, right? So this is from our partner technology, where 15,000 bots were migrated, and leveraging the technology and this approach of migration, we were able to do 80% migration of those actions and those bots with no touch, right? So a significant saving on having to manually roll a technology from one platform to another, and the total, what we find when we talk to clients about this is the total cost of ownership against, you know, a legacy platform compared to the Microsoft suite of technologies is roughly 70%, you know, give or take. Some people have negotiated pretty well on their licensure and whatnot, but there's often a hefty savings compared to the legacy platforms. And I think, Jake, the last slide we have here is simply a bit of a call to action, right? If anyone does want to talk about this sort of stuff, we're happy to have, you know, we call it a risk-free automation assessment. What we really mean by that is we're happy to sit down with you and start talking about where you are, where you're going, where your problems lie, how mature is your capability, how do we think we could probably help you leverage the Microsoft Hyperautomation suite, which, as I'm sure you've gathered by now, I'm pretty excited about, and I'm hoping you guys are excited about too.
So Jeff, I think you just became kindred spirits with all of the Lean Six Sigma members of our audience today, and you know, I agree with everything that you said. I think, you know, we don't want to come across at all by saying, hey, we're coming for your legacy RPA. This is something, you know, we can kick the tires on in parallel. But much to your point, folks, especially in healthcare right now, the challenges that our customers are facing in healthcare, the question that keeps coming to us is how can we do more with less? So that TCO, that cost cutting opportunity with optimizing not just legacy processes, but optimizing legacy RPA, it's becoming front and center.
So I think
So-
that takes us to
Oh, go ahead,
conclusion,
Jeff.
right,
Yep.
Jake? No, go on, please.
Cool. So I know we're getting close to time, and I wanted to highlight what Shelley just posted in the chat window. We have a Q&A segment before we wrap up. So please, any questions that we haven't answered, please feel free to post those in the IM window, and Jeff and Christiana and myself will make sure we answer those. But as we start to wrap up, we have a governance. One of the other questions that comes up is how does this not? You talk about democratization. You talk about these tools being available within Windows and within Office. How does this not become the Wild West of people building apps and automation anywhere, everywhere? How do we really turn this into an innovation factory, an app and automation factory? And Microsoft empowers our customers with a lot of these governance controls. And we have an accelerant that's already built by customers that have joined the Microsoft team and started to build out their wish list. When I was a customer, man, I wish we had this. So we built all these tools out within this Center of Excellence starter kit that provides these out-of-the-box analytics, including self-service analytics. But you can get tenant level packaged within Power BI. You can monitor the health, and possibly even more importantly, the folks want to see, what users are doing, where are we building automation, where are we at with capacity metrics. I want to see the KPIs all up across the enterprise. Yes, what's working, what's not working, error reporting and usage. But just this all up view of automation in your enterprise within a unified dashboard. And
may I take
yeah.
one moment to make an unplanned plug for
Absolutely,
Avanade?
yep.
We're so enthusiastic about the Microsoft platform that we've actually invested a ton of effort and time in building on top of what you've already got here in the COE activation kit to build a complete sort of control room asset that really turns Power Automate and the Power Platform suite into an enterprise-ready hyperautomation platform. So, yeah, just wanted to get that in there that it's ready, it's available. We can roll on this stuff, right?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you made that plug, Jeff, because that's important. And I think the other thing that we've been partnering up on is this, what we call HEAT, Holistic Enterprise Automation Techniques. But it's around best practices. For some folks, automation is their religion. And so much of this, the tools are great and the process engineering important. It sometimes comes right back to the people and the culture and the change management. So we've built out some additional tooling to help our customers follow automation and productivity best practices to really take this at scale. Won't unpack all of this in today's session, possibly a future session. There's already plenty of YouTube videos from the PowerCat team out there, but just a link if anybody's interested to read some white papers, and we can post some additional links on this. But I know we're coming up to the close of our time today, so we will highlight additional education resources for folks that want to learn more about the automation ecosystem from Microsoft, and certifications are really key in the automation industry. So those are available. There's a just growing and large community out there around automation within the Microsoft customer force. So wanted to provide some additional links and shameless plugs. Please join the communities, get involved, learn from your peers. If anybody's kind of at the end of this thinking, okay, where do I want to get started? We do offer RPA in a day or Power Virtual Agent in a day workshops. We can work directly with your team if there's a highlighted use case. Hey, we just like to kick the tires and try this out. We can certainly start with just a workshop. Mention that automation tool. There's a link that's going to be provided for that. If you want to walk through an automation use case and just see if any tools from Microsoft line up with that automation use case, there's a modernized opportunity to just take that for a test drive. Jeff mentioned around the migration assessment. Great tool if anybody's out there with legacy RPA and they're just curious what's possible. Don't let that be a blocker. I'm not going to say it's rainbows and kittens and easy button, but it's certainly there's an opportunity that exists. Don't feel like you've got vendor lock-in with legacy RPA. Just mentioned the Heat white paper, but then one final plug for document automation. This seems to just come up every single customer we talk with. There's paper processes within the organization. The Microsoft team is happy just to start there. Hey, how do we just go paper free? How do we go paperless? That's and even just within a use case doesn't have to be enterprise wide. Why don't I pause here real quick, Shelly, and see if there's any questions, and then we can close with the warm fuzzies.
Yeah, we've had a ton of interaction in the chat, but not a ton of questions.
Okay.
But we do have one, and folks are just wanting to know a little bit more about, you talked about the Power Platform Center of Excellence, and we see a lot of IT organizations starting there. But once that's enabled, are you seeing more of this type of automation with pro dev, more like IT is leading the dev, or is this more citizen developer, like the business can actually use these tools to drive their own automation? Or maybe it's a little of both, but any advice or recommendations, based on that type of question?
Yeah, great question. I'll share a response, and Jeff, I'd love for you to comment as well. I have two comments. First comment is a Center of Excellence starter kit does not a Center of Excellence make. It is exactly that. It is a starter kit. And while yes, Microsoft does offer support and resources and best practices, we actually have on adoption.microsoft.com a complete 100 to 500 level, best practices for folks to grow their governance, their support, their security, nurture modules, etc., to help grow that within the organization. So I think that was my first comment is, starter kit is a starter kit. But there are resources from Microsoft and resources from partners like the team here at Avanade to help customers go to the next level. The other thing that I was going to mention, and Shelly, I'm trying to think, the second part of your question was,
more
does this have to be centralized? Yeah.
Yeah, is this more pro dev or citizen?
Yeah, so it varies. Some folks want to have that centralized automation team. It's just, this is how it works best within our culture at this enterprise, is we're going to have this as a central automation team. Others, it varies. We're going to open up personal productivity automation to our knowledge workers, et cetera, but it's going to be under this warm IT security blanket and guardrails that they can't go further than just that. So it's a mix that we see in organizations, and that's something we want to help customers decide is, how do I build this factory? How do I build this app and innovation factory? And I think that's probably a segue for some comments that Jeff would like to add.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, I think the most successful adopters of the Power Platform from an automation perspective that I see really take a hybrid approach, sort of a fusion development approach. I mean, there's going to be use cases that are so specific to individuals or teams, or so small, right, that individually they don't make sense to spend the money on pro devs or whatever it is to actually go out and take that effort to automate. But in combination across thousands of instances of that happening, having citizen developers do it makes a ton of sense. But on the opposite side of the spectrum, there's going to be use cases that are so sensitive or complex or whatever it is that it really isn't appropriate to unleash that on the sit dev community. And so you need to have those pro devs there to take that on. But I mean, either way, I don't see pro dev going away completely, because even with that, that citizen development perspective, we will need folks to do things like code review and quality check and make sure that people haven't hard-coded passwords or social security numbers or whatever it is into the automation scripts, etc. Right? So you know, it really is. It's fusion automation. I think is probably the way that people squeeze the most value out of the technology that's available to them.
The great shameless plug for another podcast, Jeff. We need to talk to the audience about fusion development, but yep, could not agree more. Shelley, I think we're probably at time, so I'll just wrap here quickly. Team, we wanted to express that with all of this that we've talked about today, tools, best practices, process engineering, we always want to get back to the why, which is around, this is about up-leveling humans. We really want to bring all of this to bear so that folks can have more time for empathy. Folks can have more time to do what only humans can do within an organization. If we can take those manual tasks off of their plate, allow robots to do the robot stuff, allow humans to be that center of innovation that we know we can be. That's part of the primary objective around all of this. So we want to thank everybody that joined today, the folks that are going to listen to this recording. Nothing but our most sincere appreciation to all of you in healthcare for taking care of our communities. We've already done some questions, but want to lastly highlight an upcoming session on December 7th. Tune in right back here on the Voices of Healthcare Cloud. We'll be talking about modern member care and service convergence. And with that, we provided these links in the IM window, and this deck and recording will be available on our Voices of Healthcare Cloud website. And I think that is a wrap for today. Shelley, back to you.
Yeah, that's all. Most of you have hung on to the end. We really appreciate you. If you do want invites for future sessions actually sent to your calendar, we do provide that service. I'm putting a form in the chat now. Just click that form and put your email in there. That's the only thing we will send you. We won't send you anything else, but for future sessions on your calendar, you can get them there, or you can always grab the calendar invite, download it, and attend directly from the blog post. Thank you so much, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you on December 7th for our next session.